Well, better late than never. Classic Doctor Who review time, and as usual, I had my supporters over on Patreon help me decide which Doctor Who episode I was going to be reviewing this time. And this time I gave them the option of some of the recreations. Now, they had a number of options, including some fairly recently released stuff, and what they opted to go with was Shada, the lost in a way that is unusual even by Doctor Who standards, story of the Fourth Doctor. So, before I get into this, if you don't know the deal with Shada, now, Doctor Who, classic era Doctor Who, has it's still got a bit of missing material because stuff wasn't properly archived. So, there are still a number of stories that are either missing completely or missing pieces or one or two parts of it here or there. That's pretty much all First and Second Doctor era. By Third Doctor, we were pretty much set. So how do we end up with a lost Fourth Doctor story? Well, it's because they started shooting it and then had to stop because there was union disputes and strikes that went on at the BBC in the middle of the thing shooting. Those strikes had nothing to do with Doctor Who specifically, but Doctor Who was affected. So the result was this story that started being shot. The production got shut down. In 1992, they kind of did a preliminary recreation thing. They didn't go back and shoot the whole thing from scratch, but they had the actors record audio for the stuff they didn't already have, and they kind of put a thing together that was, just so people had a sense of what it was. But so this, normally with the recreations for missing episodes, you get the animated stuff that's out there. Like I did Power of the Daleks, which I reviewed a while back. And, that is a case of they still had the audio, but not the video. So they took the audio and the, what notes they had on the scripts and recreated it as best they could. Here, they actually have some of the video that was shot for Shada, but then there's whole swaths that were never shot. And they then used either bits that were put together for that 1992 VHS release, or brought in the surviving actors to record the lines that they didn't already have. And thus we get Shada. Now, this does actually mean that you are getting live action video interspersed with animated recreations. And it's not a case of this segment is all this and this, it'll jump from one to the other to the other. I mean, if you know anything about the shooting schedule of a show, you can tell very quickly, oh, okay, they shot all the scenes in this location and this location and this location that appears here, here, and here and throughout the story, but there's these bits in between those that we don't have anything of. Now, I'm actually somewhat familiar with the story of Shada. Well, I mean, it's it's written by Douglas Adams, and he pilfered some of the elements of this for some of his later stuff. The character of Professor Chronotis particularly basically appears in a slightly altered form in Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. So, I'm a big fan of Douglas Adams anyway. But I'm also somewhat familiar with this because I have already listened to and also done a review on the audiobook version, the audio drama version of this that was done by Big Finish. But it was done with slightly rewritten, partially, to have it work in audio because, they had to have lines explaining the stuff that you couldn't just see. But it was also rewritten for the Eighth Doctor, Paul McGann. But the story structurally is still the same. Little bits and pieces are different, bits of the interaction. And like I said, things are written out in dialogue that otherwise, you just would have seen. But so, again, I did already know this story. And it is a decent story. It is a pretty good Fourth Doctor era story. It's not Douglas Adams' best work. It's not top tier. But that didn't stop them from really kind of going all out. And actually, you get used to the flicking back and forth of the live action and the animated pretty quickly. Because I would say that, and maybe it's just by lucky coincidence that it happened this way, or maybe they actually planned it like this. I don't know. Because I don't know how much they messed with the original shooting script. But the very first animated scene is a rather extended sequence with a character where we see him, ride on a bike back to his apartment and then do a number of things with no dialogue and no audio. So you just get used to the visualization of it in this dialogue-free scene, and then they start talking later. And as far as the animation quality goes, it's fairly rudimentary, but to compare it to other ones that I've seen like this, Power of the Daleks being the big one, and this is actually done by the same animation company that did Power of the Daleks, this is better, this is smoother, this is more frames of animation than that one is. So it's a little less jagged, it's a little less robotic in the movements, especially in the mouths. That said, it's still fairly cheap animation. But then again, Doctor Who, it looked fairly cheap at the time anyway. So that, in a way, that's kind of oddly fitting. So, plot. Hui. Okay, so the Doctor and Romana, this is second incarnation of Romana, so Lalla Ward, they show up at this university, and not entirely sure why they got... Well, no, they got dropped off there because a friend of the Doctor's, Professor Chronotis, I mentioned him, kind of sent them a note saying, hey, I need you to come and help me sort something out. Now, the Professor he's a wonderful character. I actually really like him a lot, but it's a good thing that he's so endearing because he's kind of frustrating for other characters to deal with because he is so forgetful. It's, he just cannot hold ideas straight in his head. He actually can remember pretty much anything, but trying to recall any of it and sort it out from all the other stuff that he knows and has remembered or it has faded to the back of his mind. He's just not great at sorting through all that stuff. But he's a really wonderful, endearing character, and also the Doctor. This is at a point where the Doctor and Romana are really the romantic entanglement that Tom Baker and Lalla Ward had going on is very much bleeding into their on-screen chemistry, and it's very lively when they're together, and it works quite well. I'll actually say that the villain of this one, whose plan is strange and bizarre, and I'm not going to explain because it doesn't really get fully explained what his goal is until towards the end. But basically, as far as what he's doing, he is shown up on Earth. He's tracking the Professor. There's a book that the Professor at some point had that he wants to get his hands on. And he has this sphere that can attach to someone and basically pull their mind out of their body. It's funny, minus the drill, I suppose, but I couldn't help but think of the spheres from Phantasm. If you're a connoisseur of overambitious, slightly cheesy horror. But in any case, the villain he actually works better here than I thought he was going to, because it's been a while since I've listened to the Shada audio, but my memory was that the villain was one of the weak elements, and it was largely because he was fairly generic, both in his characterization and the delivery of the lines. Now, part of this might be the actor, part of this might be the directing that was done, maybe they even tweaked the script, I don't know. But the villain plays a lot less cackling stereotype here than what I remember him being in the audio version, which is nice. He actually works pretty well here. He's surprisingly intimidating and pretty calm throughout. I have a feeling they probably had the ability to tweak this character the most because he honestly has very little of his stuff shot. He is animated for the vast majority of his screen time. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some tinkering with that character versus maybe what would have happened if it had all been shot, back when it was originally being worked on. There's also some really fun, like, little nods. Like, it opens up, with the BBC, the logo. And if you had been watching BBC in the era at the time, they had just these little things like, and now we bring you the latest adventure of Doctor Who, and whatever. But it opens with something like that, but it says a little bit later than originally planned to be broadcast. And then they also have a little thing at the very end, which is also like really nice and cool and sweet. And I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm not going to spoil. So there's some nice little nods to the fact that getting anything close to a proper rendition of this has taken forever. But it's quite nice. Like I said, I'm definitely glad that it exists. But, to compare it to the other stuff that Douglas Adams had his hands most directly on from Doctor Who, I don't think I think it easily runs third. I think Pirate Planet is notably better, and I think it doesn't even hold a candle to City of Death. But it's still pretty good. It's got less of the Douglas Adams wit to it. There's some of it there, but it's not as humor heavy, either in premise or in lines. But it does have the sort of sci-fi concepts that Adams tended to deal in. And that is nice to see on display, because that his conceptual stuff was always a good fit for Doctor Who. So overall, like, I did enjoy this, and everybody gives a good performance. It's surprising. I was actually surprised how seamless the vocal performances were, in terms of the animated recreations vocally matching the older stuff. Because I've noted before, when I have done, like, say, audio dramas with Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor, I can hear the age in his voice. I actually hear it a lot less here than I do in The Big Finish. So I don't know, again, if they had, like, done, like, some After Effects to, like, really try and make it match up. The voice for K9 isn't John Leeson, though. It's somebody else. And I don't know why. Like, I did look it up. I confirmed it was somebody else, but I couldn't find, like, a quick and easy answer as to why somebody other than John Leeson was voicing K9. And, like, I research, beyond the most basic. I'm not cut out for it. So that did bug me a little, but it's just because I'm like, that doesn't sound quite right. But that's nitpicking at this point. And I don't really want to nitpick this thing. It is well constructed. It's well put together. It's the Doctor and Romana. They've got fantastic chemistry. The villain has an interesting idea. The guest characters are pretty good. There's also, like, a human character, a guy named, I think it was Chris, and sort of a colleague that he has a bit of a crush on there. They're kind of superficial supporting characters, but they're also sweet, and they don't bug me, which honestly is enough sometimes with some of these supporting characters. And I was happy to have gotten around to seeing this, because I'd already heard the audio, I was like, do I even need to see it? Well, no, I did, because even though narratively it's pretty much the same thing, it does have enough of a different feel just by having a different Doctor in it. And it's funny because I've been asked before, what's a story where you'd put a different Doctor in it, and how do you think it would change it? And, that's not like a mental exercise that I'm cut out for. I can't quite fit those pieces together in my head. This kind of gave me my first taste of that, though, of how a different Doctor in the same adventure alters the feel and the vibe of the thing. And it's interesting. So not only would I recommend this, I would actually recommend also seeking out the audio drama version with Paul McGann, and just contrasting and seeing, the different ways that the same story can be told. I think, especially if you have an interest in narrative and writing, it's a wonderful contrast just to see how much of a difference, little changes make. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Shada! Have you seen it, or heard it, or read it? Because it was a novelization for a while. It might have even gotten a reprint when this came out. I don't know. But however you've experienced it, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of stuff to do. Buttons, links, Patreon. I mentioned it already, but, really helps. Whole bunch of other stuff besides, and give it a look. All sorts of things down there. But also, you don't have to. It's okay, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meeting. So until next time, this council is adjourned.